when the IWW Wobblies used to get their own folks or people who are very sympathetic elected to local sheriff's offices so they wouldn't break strikes.
Sure.
Today, I know a lot of anarchists who would not even, it's a different context, but like just get out of the box of it, who wouldn't even think, oh, that's a state, we can't engage with it, or anything like that. No, but I just wanted, like, did you know, like, if you could talk about, like how you've been.
Sure, no, Wobblies were doing this, and I think that was a really good idea back in the time. Wobblies were doing something that's even better idea. I think these were called the penny auctions. I don't know if you know what penny auctions were. Penny auctions was an idea if you lose a house, people losing their houses in times of the Great Depression. So what the Wobblies would do, they would go to the auction, they would go with guns. Wobblies were mostly pacifists, but you know, some of them carried guns. And they would go to an auction, and there was an auction, the foreclosed home would be foreclosed, right? Would be sold, and they would just push the rich people with guns away, and they would buy the house for a penny, and then give it back to the legitimate owner. So this penny auctions, maybe without guns, is something that we should try to recreate today. And actually there is an interesting group in the Bay Area called Flying Picket. They're trying to do a very similar thing. And I think that they're doing a very interesting work. So I don't know, in terms of relating to the police, in terms of relating to the...
Just general stuff like where that was a good, because in that instance, that tactic made sense in the strategy of trying to build. And like, let me give you an example. Like, I think it was Andrew Flood. He's who's the anarchist from
Andrew Flood
from Ireland?
Yeah.
He just moved to Canada. Yeah, he gave a talk like 2 years ago. And he was talking about how in Ireland the thing started around abortion is still a big thing. I'm pretty sure it's still not legal in most cases. I'm not quite sure. And he said, like in most abortion cases around the world, what happens is a doctor will perform an abortion, and will perform an abortion, then they get reprimanded. The thing goes to court, and then it's legislated by the court. That's like how most things you win about. And he said a big stumbling block in that was that there's some medical board that's elected that will stop it before it's happening. And the first thing that clicked in my mind was then get some sympathetic people on that board. And he didn't even that didn't even come up. So I'm just thinking, like, just trying to, like, struggles to actually democratize things that you might be against, but some people, I just feel there's a tendency to, just because you're against what it is as it is, but you can't go in it because you can't engage with it, because then that makes you, you're just as bad. Yeah, you're just as bad as it.
Well, you're familiar with famous Orwell's remark against the anarchist king. You always have to have your hands so clean that you end up staying without your hands. You know, he was warning against this kind of moralism, purism, and yeah, anarchists are definitely guilty of that. I think that we need to confront institutions of power in a different way. We should not be against reforms. We should embrace what Andrej Grubacic was calling revolutionary reforms. Of course, I mean, everything else was just idiotic. So not engaging with the state in the way that you are describing, I think, would be a catastrophic mistake. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about another way of accompaniment, which is, well, I read an article a while ago by Adrienne Russell, and she mentions the way that the Zapatistas inspired people to use mass media and to spread ideas, like by creation of myths. And then another author that did some ethnography across like the anti-globalization movement, Jeff Juris, I think. Sure. So my question is, like, how much of the activism do you think people should do in the kind of accompaniment that's like in cyberspace and internet versus, like, physical? Maybe it's like how much, if it's like more effective and like now in this kind of climate.
That's what Michael was saying, I think. I mean, there are different people are capable of doing different things. And yeah, sure, I mean, some of it can be done online, some people have exquisite, and one of the areas where our movement is the strongest, meaning the global movement, is actually internet and, all of these things. And that definitely is true. But again, it's a little bit disconcerting to me. We're talking about this, but we always go somewhere else. We are always talking about accompanying people out there. which again is great, good and interesting. But it is curious that the whole logic of our conversation is about accompanying people and trying to figure out how to relate to people outside of the United States. And I'm sure that you have noticed this too. And this probably is telling us something, that we are not doing something right. There are people in 10 cities in Sacramento, and there are many actually terrific activists who are working with them from San Francisco and from Santa Cruz that I came to meet and know, who are going to 10 cities in California and organizing with these people. And you know, it's a wonderful work. It's extremely important work. So let's try to think globally, definitely. I mean, I spent my whole life in what is called the wrongly anti-globalization movement. But let's also think about local stuff. Let's think about local organizing. I couldn't believe that I would be saying these things, 15 years ago. But we really need to go back to local organizing. Otherwise, nothing will happen. You know, we just keep talking, how do we relate to people in Nicaragua? How do we relate to people in Iraq? And these are important questions. But I don't think they should be the first question. And anarchists, actually, I have to say, in defense of anarchism, anarchists always said, there is a beautiful book by Benedict Anderson, and few people here are actually working on the relationship between anarchist and anti-colonial struggles. Anarchism was always extremely flexible and extremely open to people fighting anti-colonial struggles everywhere, much more than Marxism or any other form of any other ideology, whatever was. So yes, I definitely believe in global solidarity, revolutionary solidarity, but there are people around us who are actually starving. There are people around us who are organizing. There are people around us who are... We need to find a way of talking to these people, of working with them, of just... Stoughton Lynn always says, and I love the sentence, he says, socialism is not an economic system, it's a life for dying people. It's very simple, but it's really true. And this is the socialism that we need to reimagine. So, okay, maybe a few more questions, or one or two more questions. I think it's getting late by now. Emily?
I have two, but I'm just going to ask one now, if we have time.
Ask both.
Which is, I feel like there's a really strong feminist current that runs throughout the book. And Stoughton addresses that directly in a number of places. And I feel like the notion of accompaniment and also just, in general, sort of support, right? If you break it down, we're talking about social reproduction, having communities of struggle, but that's a community of care, talking about basically like effective relationships within the construction of movements that we want to have. That thread runs throughout. Sometimes it's called feminist, sometimes it's not. You can read the same thing coming from Zapatista ethics of listening, and I mean basically they're sort of ethical questions, but I was just wondering if you could talk about that, talk about where you see that thread, that ethics in the book.
Which will be the feminist thread.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Stoughton has a chapter called Ain't I a Woman, right? Probably you're talking about this too. Yeah, Stoughton is reflecting on...
Women's auxiliaries being actually the thing that created the social fabric that made unions win.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, my own work is on wobbly democracy. I'm a historian of interracial self-activity of industrial workers of the world. And I'm writing right now about a strike called McKinley Rocks in Pittsburgh. And it was an amazing strike. And one of the most amazing things were the way that women were fighting in this strike. And whenever you're looking through the history of the industrial workers of the world, you will see that women, I mean, it's not only Bread and Roses, the most famous strike in Lawrence, it's many other strikes where women were actually extremely, not only active, but actually leading these strikes. And I don't have to remind you of all the wonderful, and we are talking about this in the book, feminist women organizers of that time, like the Elizabeth Gilroy Flynn, Mother Jones before her, and many others. So yes, we are definitely talking about this in the book, and we are definitely maybe not enough, but we were trying to address this.